good.
Convention, WB 669.
Shabba-da-doo.
Smooth Jazz.
You're listening to Mission Stories on the Mission Stories Network. Welcome to Mission Stories. My name is Troy. I'm here with, well, I don't even know what to call you anymore. You're a new man.
New man.
You're married.
Yep.
You're married. You're
What's the? I've never actually. Is it like Sir Lyndon now?
You're Sir. You've been knighted.
Am I a nobleman?
Wink, wink.
Now that I'm married, I'm unfamiliar with the laws.
The law is a tricky and subtle thing, and we are unfamiliar with it.
Like I now have like extra voting rights.
Yeah, and you own property.
No.
Okay.
I own a car.
You own a car, and you and your wife are co-partners in a venture we like to call life. And you've begun it, and life has finally begun for you, hasn't it?
Yeah. Before I was just a little baby.
Yeah.
With chubby little baby thighs.
Yep.
Stumbling in this world.
Yes.
But those chubby little baby thighs.
They've grown up.
They've become chubby little man thighs.
Little man thighs. And they're walking in a chubby baby way down.
And they're striding along
Main Street, USA, saying, "Hey,
heading to the tippy top of the mountains.
tippy top of the mountain. I'm here. I'm in charge, and I got a wife." And hey, how good did it feel when you were in your place of honeymooning, which was what was it?
The Dominican Republic.
That's right.
Very exotic.
I knew that, and I was testing you. How did it feel to be like, my wife and I would like to eat at your fine establishment? Mi buen señor.
It was very good.
It was muy bueno.
I was like, give me your finest French restaurant. And they're like, well, of course. Here it is, sir.
Here's our finest French restaurant in the Dominican Republic. Hey, hold on. History lesson. Is France a part of that? Do they speak French there?
I think you're thinking of...
Is that one of those?
I think they speak more French in Haiti, which is on the same island.
Are you kidding me?
It's, yeah. So
Haiti's on the same island as Dominican Republic?
Yeah, there's like a name for it. It's like Hispaniola or something. You know?
Oh, so it's not quite
It's got it. The
French.
island has a name.
Oh, the island itself.
The island itself has a name. And I think it's like 2/3 is the Dominican Republic and 1/3 is Haiti. And we were as far away from Haiti as possible.
Why?
Haiti is one of the worst places.
That's what I've heard. I've heard it's not like a very good vacation destination. How can it be, though, that on the other side of the island is the Dominican Republic? Such a nice vacation destination. Well, that's my first question. Is it a nice vacation destination? Do you recommend it to the true and faithful?
I would.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a seasoned honeymooner.
You've only done it once.
I've only done it once. Yeah. We had our famous engagement trip to the Pacific coast of Mexico.
Okay.
The Dominican Republic made Mexico look pretty first world.
So Mexico is like thebomb.com compared to the Dominican Republic.
Well, let's not be too hasty.
Okay.
Don't take my words out of context. Yes.
It's a bag of crap.
Well, I much preferred Mexico. But it's a whole different system. You know, we were at
What do you mean?
You know, the parents', condo.
Right, yeah.
Versus like an all-inclusive.
You prefer a more homey styles, like a residence, as opposed to a tourist focus.
Well, I mean, we went in the low season, so we're like, hey, can we get some ice cream? And they're like, ice cream?
Ice
We're like, helado. And they're like, sit down.
Sit down, sir.
And then 5 minutes later, they're like, we don't have any ice cream. And we're just like, what?
Como se dice no ice cream?
So, yeah.
So what did you do? Did you flip a table? Did you punch a man? Did you have to show Jasmine that you're a man by physically assaulting someone else?
No, that's not how that works.
Okay.
We then left the resort.
Wait, that's not how that works?
No.
Okay. So I've been physically assaulting men to show women I'm a man for all.
You're like, I've slapped so many male waiters.
so many waiters. Yeah, male waiters only.
Obviously.
Yeah, okay.
We had to leave the resort and venture out into this village, which was pretty hood.
Okay.
and we found some ice cream off the resort.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
This resort sounds like a garbage resort.
Well, it was pretty nice. The surrounding area was pretty hood. It was adventurous, though.
Okay.
And we've already been over the beach. We don't need to rehash that.
Well, we not on the podcast, unless you want to.
Well, it brings up a lot of hurt feelings.
On whose part?
Mine.
Yours?
My wife's.
Your wife's? I almost
We
called
went
your wife my wife.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Well, we went to a beach resort.
Yeah.
But this beach was covered in seaweed.
Don't you hate that?
Yeah.
I hate when that happens.
And they're like, well, we'll clean up the seaweed. The ocean just dumps its dead seaweed on this particular beach.
Huh.
So they scoop it all up and leave it on a giant pile on the edge of the beach to rot away. And our little travel advisor, agent guy, representative, he's all like, it's the ocean.
Hey,
We can't control the ocean.
can't control the ocean.
And I was like, okay, fair point, but why don't you?
Yeah, you're kind of like maybe you can, but you're not. You're choosing not to.
Like, I've seen Aquaman.
Yeah,
Like, he could.
and I've seen it too.
So
you're just like, hey, you're like under.
So he's trying to say, like, I can't control the ocean. This is where it dumps its dead seaweed. And I'm like, but
Aquaman.
why don't you control
Where's
the ocean?
Jason Momoa?
I was like,
Get him
I feel like
here.
they're saying they can't control what the ocean does,
Yeah.
but I feel like they also haven't looked into it.
Or it's almost like they're on the bad side of the ocean. It's just like the ocean, they got on its bad side somehow. They did something, and now the ocean is taking its revenge almost on this particular beach where you were.
And our
honeymoon.
fellow Canadian travelers, which is interesting, You head off to a foreign country and just that national tribalism,
Yeah.
where it's like, hello, fellow Canadians.
Yeah.
We're now friends because we're both Canadians.
Like best friends?
Well, no. It was like we see each other on the resort and we give each other a wink and a nod.
It's hardly best friends, Lyndon.
Well, it was the closest we had. I thought they were adorable because they were like,
Just married?
no, they were like, oh, we've been married for like 25 years.
Oh.
And they were very clear. They're like, we're from Ottawa.
Yeah.
We are French, but we're not from Quebec. They wanted to be very clear. They're like, we may be French, but we're not from Quebec.
We are not
And I appreciated
from,
that as,
Quebec?
someone from Western Canada. I appreciated that they're very detail oriented.
Who hates French people?
No one hates French people.
No.
Who hates people from Quebec?
Right.
Everyone.
Yes. And I'm sorry to our one Quebec listener. I know there's at least one, and I apologize. We have like 6 fans. She's one of them. I'm sorry. Okay, so that's such good news. I'm so glad that went so well for you and your new wife.
Yeah.
And all the best to you too.
Well, thank you.
All the best to Jasmine. Hey, Jasmine wrote us an email.
Imagine that.
Were you there maybe when she wrote it? Or
I
what?
don't know what she wrote about. I know that she wrote an email.
So on our last podcast recorded weeks ago, before you were married, just before you were married, should we could debrief on that as well. This is what she writes. She says, well, anyway, on that previous podcast, we had talked about how maybe in the future going forward, we're going to go through some of the aspects of church history that are a little shady, a little strange, a little
Rocky, bumpy,
concerning, troubling, faith demoting sometimes, and try to reconcile with it and see what we think about it, that sort of thing. And instead of covering up the wound and just like letting it sully and soil and rot, let's clean it up. Let's get some sanitizing light of day on that.
Right.
Pour some Bactine in it.
A little polysporin.
Dab some polysporin. Suture it up and begin to heal. And so that's what, okay, so.
And we are certified spiritual doctors.
And we are doctors.
Doctrinal doctors.
We're doctrinal doctors.
Surgeons of the spirit.
Spiritual surgeons, doctrinal doctors. Oh, man, I love that. This is why
we're qualified.
You're number one, Lyndon. Doctrinal doctors, spiritual surgeons. So this is what she says. Yes! Get into church history myths and facts. And then she does the clap emoji. So she's like, dig up the dirt, spill the tea. Also, I would like to declare that I'm not the reason you two have been slow at recording new episodes. I'm the #1 fan of the podcast. Signed, Jasmine Naglis.
Oh, that's cute.
What a proud... of course, the email says from Jasmine Anderson. Gonna have to change that email.
You're going to have to call Google.
Google, get it done.
Yeah, she is she's a historian.
Yes.
Almost done her degree in
Oh,
history.
right, yeah, she is a historian. She actually is a historical...
She like reads books about church history like for fun.
She wants to do historical hysterectomies on history.
I don't know.
No, that doesn't. That doesn't. I even felt it flop as it came out of my my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
on to the next one.
she. Okay. Like, just don't even. This next one's from Alexander Williams. He says Wendy's is good. Could this have something to do with the fact that we lit him up about hating Wendy's or something? I don't.
Yeah, this is like from 6 months ago.
Yeah, I don't honestly remember that. He says, I'll be your villain, because we call him a villain. But sadly, I go to BYUI, where they will not permit me to have the facial hair I like. I thought he was going to say, not permit me to be a villain.
That's probably also true.
That's also true. I suppose mustaches are allowed, but I like having a beard. Lyndon's episode did, in fact, get more listens. I know. I know, Alex. You didn't have to rub it in, but you chose to. He continues. Also, Lyndon's mother is my favorite character in the show. Get her on the show. Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
Would she do that?
I think she would.
That would be a fun thing.
I think she would because she said multiple times, get me on the podcast.
Get me on the show. Well, hey, Cheryl, let's get you on. Also, he says, yeah, let's talk church history. Wow, him too. Let's talk church history. You guys should get into it. Truer and faithfuler now that you're back, Alex Williams. P.S. Mission Stories 4 was the best. So I would, that's a good one. Mission Stories 4.
I always say my greatest performance.
You do a great job. You play the wacky
Little shyster.
huckster guy, and very funny. And then Nick, my friend in the middle, plays the guy sticking up Joseph F. Smith. That cracks me up every time too. So, well, that's his email. You know what? We've had 2 endorsements to get into church history. I'll be honest, Lyndon. I'm a little nervous to get into it, to really get into church history.
Well,
I'm nervous.
Your first topic of choice is very personal to you.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes I forget that I went into great detail various times in this show's run, that I basically stated my doubts, my concerns, and some with the church and regarding church history, and then I'll be like, let's just move on. Since then, I've softened my positions on some things and everything, so I'm feeling better about those things, but the problems still stand.
You came in, you had a ruptured spiritual appendix.
Yeah.
You were like that Russian guy in Antarctica. You sutured yourself up.
Yeah.
Pulled that appendix out.
Is this a true story?
That's a true story.
That's a cool story.
Yeah.
Is it much more than what you just described, or?
A Russian doctor in Antarctica had a ruptured appendix. He had to perform surgery on himself.
On himself.
There's a picture of him doing it.
Wow.
On the internet.
I would love to see that picture. That should be our picture for the Instagram.
Yeah.
And it'll be like
And we'll just
explicit image.
Photoshop your face on it.
Yeah.
Because you're the spiritual surgeon.
And we'll turn it into a meme where it's just like the spleen will be my testimony or something. Or like, what else could it be?
You're literally pulling a seer stone out of your appendix and suturing yourself up.
Yeah, a gall seer stone. So that's the first topic of, because we thought when we were discussing this, we're like, where should we begin? At the beginning.
Let's start where it hurts the most.
Where it hurts. It really did hurt me the most. Seer stones. The seer stone. The seer stone itself that was used ultimately to translate
much of the Book of Mormon.
Well, the entire Book of Mormon that we have now was translated via this seer stone.
The whole thing.
Now,
I thought he gave up near the end. He didn't need it anymore.
I'm not sure. We'd have to verify. You know what should do?
There was a timeline.
We should do like a checklist or start a list of like things we need to fact check after the fact. But for now, I say we just go off the dome.
That's all Dax Shepard does on his podcast.
Yeah.
And he's a famous guy.
And we're not, and so we should at least hold ourselves. Wait, why would we hold ourselves to the same standards as famous people? That doesn't work like that.
That's a whole episode. Well, if you're not, I think his podcast is called Armchair Experts.
I've heard an episode.
Yeah, where they just shoot from the hip like us.
Yep.
And then the next episode is fixing all their missed shots.
Fixing the misfires. So seer stones. Should we outline the problem of it first? Or my problem,
right?
Anyway.
Because I'm sitting here, I'm like, no problem here.
You're like, I'm fine with it. All seer stones, yeah. Get me more seer stones.
Brigham Young promised me one.
This is what I thought.
Bloodstones too.
And this might be just a function of my bloodstones. Let's not step over that. Let's come back to that. This is, I think, a function of my perception of, growing up, what I thought versus just what the reality was. And I think that's the whole crux of all of my problems that I've had with these things. If I was told from a young age all of the things about the church, I wonder if I would have any problem with it at all. It just seems like...
Well, that's why the church started, back in
telling things
2014 or whatever.
Yes.
I know 2015 was the Seer Stone essay and all the pictures, where they're like, listen, we told you all a lot of stories growing up. Mm-hmm. My favorite example is the Word of Wisdom. That's my Seer Stone.
Okay. Interesting.
Right? Where I grew up watching like the animated, scripture stories.
Yeah.
Famous, I don't remember what it's called. One of them is Joseph
Smith. The Living
Smith.
Scriptures.
Living Scriptures, Joseph Smith getting surgery as a boy for his leg and being like, no whiskey for me, sir. And they're like, look at him at such a young age following the Word of Wisdom.
Already following it.
And then it's like, except for then the rest of his life where he was a borderline alcoholic until he eventually became not an alcoholic.
I don't know if that ever happened.
Yeah, I don't think he ever stopped drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
He saved it for sacramental occasions, is what he would say.
Okay. And how often a day were those?
Weddings.
Okay.
Weddings are a form of sacrament, so you could drink wine at weddings.
Yes.
The saints in Nauvoo would brew their own beer at home, and if it was a hot day and he was stopping to commune with them, he'd have a cold one.
How did they keep it cold? You'd have a hot one. I'll have a hot brew, please, on this hot day.
I don't know. They got little creeks or something. They got systems.
Keep it in the basement. That's the trick.
What would they? Here's what they would do.
Okay.
Remember, ice shacks. I think they would pull giant chunks of ice out of the river in the winter, put it in a shack, cover it in sawdust. The ice would basically not melt until August.
Is that true?
That's like a real thing.
That's a cool thing. We should
make
one of those.
That's like homesteady, old-timey refrigeration.
Lyndon's homestead tips.
Did they do that in Nauvoo? Of course.
Yes. I'm like, are you asking me?
With no citation, yes, they did.
Because I literally just learned what this was a second ago.
So that's my explanation for how he could have a cold one.
Okay, so your issue is more with the Word of Wisdom.
Well, they whitewashed the history.
Right, that's our main point. There's a bit of whitewashing happening.
Where it's just like, let's tell the kids in the animated Living Scriptures a story that paints things in the light we want.
Favorably.
Yeah. We'll not lie, but we'll also not tell the whole truth.
Now, I don't know if now is the time to get into it, but I've wrestled with this question, and it's really what it is for those of you who have seen or heard of originally it was a comic book called Watchmen by Alan Moore, and something Gibbons was the artist, but it was turned into a film in, I think, 2010 or something, and spoiler alert, the end of the movie is that the villain orchestrates an attack on Earth by aliens. It's not real aliens. It's just like he's made it seem like it is. And he does this to unite the human race. So it's like ultimately, and he ends up doing it, and it ends up working. But it's not the truth. It's not the full truth of the situation.
Right.
And this is the big question of the thing. Us as kids, right, we're receiving not quite the full truth. We're receiving a simplified, whitewashed version of the truth. And we ended up living our lives pretty good. And we're good, contributing members of society now, and good Mormon boys and everything. Now,
you might be a Mormon boy. I'm a Latter-day Saint man.
and I am still a Mormon boy, and I can't wait to earn my entry into Latter-day Saint manhood at some point.
So it's around the corner.
I'll keep waiting for that. Maybe 31's the year. I don't know.
Fingers crossed.
Fingies crossed. But that's really the question, Lyndon.
Yeah, they fed us plain white rice.
Is it good? Do the ends justify the means? What do you think?
Evidently not, because they've reversed their policy. And I trust, #DesNat. That if they're changing it to be like, let's just give the whole truth for them.
Yeah.
Then that must be like the way to go.
Well, yeah.
So it's like, we're not hiding anything in a hat. It's all out there.
It's all out there.
Which I think is the way to go.
So I know that here's the thing. People leave the church, and I understand that like they would alter their policy because people are leaving the church in response to like, oh my goodness, I've been told a different story from it's a simplified, more easily digestible story than what the actual story is. I've been lied to, therefore I want to leave the church. I can't trust them, sort of a thing. But for me, I don't know. I kind of come back to this question of, does a child, like I think there's like a level or a theory of faith, like that there's 5 steps of faith or something. I don't know if you've heard of this, where like the first stage is like sort of a literal stage of faith, where it's just like, yes, there was a literal flood and everything in the Bible is literal and it's all very simple, and it's sort of easy for a child to understand and grasp these concepts, and it's like almost a tool for them to learn these things. Mm-hmm. And then the next stage, I forget all the other stages, I think. But that I remember that being the first one, and it's sort of maybe like the next is that like you understand there's a metaphorical significance to what is being taught.
Right.
Literary devices are employed.
I mean, I was just about to bust out my doxastic voluntarism.
What is that?
It's a fancy word for the philosophical idea that people are in direct control of their beliefs. So that's the idea of you have to take the information that's out there, digest it, and then you make the choice to believe.
Or not.
Right.
If you so decide, if you want to.
But like part of that...
Ultimately, it is your decision.
Part of that idea is you have to take in all the relevant information and then make a choice. Right. There's like the idea that's like non-voluntary is that just taking in the information, you will, it's like a function. Yeah. It's like input this information, you will then believe this.
Right.
I think a lot of people in today's media, a lot of, people with ideologies are just like, if I could just show people a picture of an aborted fetus, if they could just see that information, then they would believe what I believe.
Right.
That's like the involuntary version of it.
Yeah.
But really, My belief is it's voluntary, where it's like you can't do it without taking in the information.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take in all the truthful information you can, and then you make a choice.
Is this the idea that a perfectly rational person, when confronted with sort of a perfectly sound line of reason, cannot help but believe the end conclusion of that thing, of that line of logic? Does that
That would
make
be
sense?
like the involuntary, yeah, I think.
Okay, but what you're saying is that you still have to process. There's a process that of the information that is taking place, and even the line of logic, and you almost have to test it yourself before you make the decision to believe it or not. Is that because what do you think? Because
This is literally an Elders Quorum lesson I taught back in 2014.
wow, you remember the year?
Well, let me tell you a marriage story.
Okay.
I have a whole folder of all like the lessons and talks I've ever prepared.
Wow.
And as part of our marriage scriptural home study, Jasmine asks me every now and then to
Crack it open.
crack open a slideshow
Oh wow.
and try to remember. So this is one we did recently. And so I combined a talk by Lyndon W. Clayton.
Of course you did.
Well, he goes by L. Whitney Clayton. And this was my joke, I think, when I gave the lesson, is I changed his name. And I was like, if your first name is Lyndon, why would you ever go by Whitney?
Yeah. That's a great point, actually.
His name is literally Lyndon. It's like Neil Lyndon Anderson, but his Lyndon is spelt differently than mine. But L. Whitney Clayton is Lyndon spelt the same way as me, middle name Whitney, and he goes by L. Whitney Clayton.
What an idiot.
So he gave a talk, I think that was called Choose to Believe. So I combined his talk with the philosophies of men, with William James's, pragmatism.
Yeah.
And so I think I titled it Choose to Pragmatism. Because ultimately, William James's point was that, I don't know how much you want me to get into it, but he's like, because he was at the time when science was in full swing.
Yeah.
So this is like somewhere in the 19th century. He's like a contemporary of Joseph Smith.
Okay.
And it's like chemistry, physics, biology was just really coming in.
Yep.
And it was like the scientific revolution in the 19th century. And he said there's a philosophical dilemma where all these people are basically, and Nietzsche talks about this too. Mm-hmm. They're throwing away all their old traditional beliefs to be like, the only thing that's true is what's empirical,
right?
Is what you can prove through science. And he's like, hey, now, that might not be the case. So his idea was to marry the two ideas, to be like, you have to process all the information and choose the most pragmatic truth. Whatever serves you the best is the best thing to believe in.
Does this sort of takes objective truth and like that sort of subjectivism, is it not? Like and a lot of members of the church are very, it's taught, I was going to say religiously, this idea of objective truth. And we lean very much on objective truth, probably too much, given all of the subjectivity of interpreting church history and everything.
Well, you would never pragmatically not believe in gravity.
Right.
So it's like, because his point was like these empirical materialists became very skeptical and what's the other one? What's the other term? Well, they were like skeptics.
Cynical. Yeah.
And then it's like the other far end of the spectrum where you become very like mystical and subjective. Where he's like, listen, you got to take in all the information and choose the most pragmatic thing. So it's not about saying like, well, we don't believe in scientific truths, because it's very pragmatic to believe in scientific truths.
Yeah. But it's also, are you saying as well that it's possible that it's also pragmatic? Like for me, this is a lot of where pragmatism is what really lifts the load that before learning all of these things, a belief in a objective mysticism, like that every claim of the church is 100% true. All of sort of our mystical claims about the supernatural or the divine, or like things that Joseph Smith claims to have happened, actually happened, and that there is a supernatural side of life, or a spiritual, an unseen sort of, I don't even know, you know what I'm talking about, an ethereal side of life, a true unseen side of
metaphysical
life, a metaphysical side of life. So for me, when that broke down a little, my belief in that broke down, pragmatism is what really picked up the load, and to say that it's simply a good idea to live to live as though there is a God, and that Christ is our Savior, and that the commandments are good for you to live. When that faith is struggling, to simply live as if, I guess like when your faith is less certain, just to simply live the faith by itself, which I guess is like almost a stronger faith than someone who,
that was actually my
who believes certainly.
That was my question for Jasmine while I'm teaching her. Because I do remember one comment from a very valiant member of the Elders Quorum.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, thanks for the lesson. He's like, honestly, that's the only reason I stay in the church. Because he's like, I was born into it. My family's all members of the church. It would be too difficult to leave the church. It would be unpragmatic to leave the church. And he's like, and it's never led me astray.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah.
Why not just stay?
He was also, you may know him, a lover of Ayn Rand. So rational objectivism was his way of life. So pragmatism spoke to him.
Yeah. That's an interesting...
And so some people are just
idea.
like, well, that's gross.
Yeah.
Where it's just like a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
But it's like, as Lyndon W. Clayton says, he's like, you choose to believe when you go to church, read the scriptures, pray. He's like, if you just choose to do those things, you're reaffirming your decisions to believe.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's like, you might be like, I don't know about all this, but then you live the commandments and stuff, then you're still making a choice.
Yeah. I have felt in the interim period of the crumbling of my belief in metaphysical things that, I don't know, I felt very in the closet about that belief, and about not exactly, believing quite like maybe I feel like I'm supposed to. I'm kind of ashamed of that I don't hold those same beliefs. And I think this conversation is sort of helping me be like, there doesn't need to be a harsh judgment upon someone's testimony just because it's a little... because it is more maybe pragmatically focused than, metaphysically focused. Or
well, the great philosopher Theo Gibb.
Yes.
He said, orthodoxy isn't that important in the church. It's all about orthopraxy.
What is orthopraxy again?
That's like everyone acting or doing the same thing.
Right.
So it's like, if you maybe you don't have to believe everything that's in the church.
Yeah.
But you have to do all the things you're supposed to do in the church.
Yes.
You got to do all the things that are in the Temple Recommend interview.
Yeah.
Some of those questions are orthoprax. Some of them are orthodox.
Yeah.
So it's like, some things you need to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Some things you actually need to do. But honestly, pragmatically speaking, it's the things you do that matter.
Matters the most. And what I guess the intentions of your heart are, God up there.
Right. Because you could be an unorthodox member of the church, keep that to yourself, and just do the things.
Live the church.
And you're never poisoning the barrel of apples, right?
Right.
But if you're someone that's going to church, but then your Instagram and Twitter accounts are just dedicated to trashing it.
Anti-Mormon things. Yeah, then that's not a good thing.
Then it's like, well, you're living an incongruent life, and it's probably poisoning your soul.
Yeah, like it can't be good for you. So this is all sort of an elongated introduction into the first
Historical point.
and it's to go up a few layers from where we were. Told a different story about the Seer stones than what I learned later was the truth of the matter. Mm-hmm. The story we learned was that Joseph Smith in 4 years after
1820 is the first vision.
The first vision. 1830s when the church was. So I guess like 1824 is when he gets the plates. Is that right?
It was 4 years after the first vision, I assume.
Yeah.
Church historians will correct us.
Yep, let's fact check that too.
I know 1826 is when he got brought up on his trumped up charges of treasure hunting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's like after.
Yeah, now we're getting into it. Timelines get a little murky here. I don't know if people know this, but the very first telling of the first vision was 12 years after the fact. So he's sort of 12 years after the fact, he goes back and says, in the spring of 1820, this is what happened. Which is, I don't know, for some maybe troubling. Others, perfectly reasonable explanation for it. You know, he's obviously receives a lot of, persecution. And if you receive, negative reinforcement for sharing it.
That might be the first time it was recorded, but he was like telling people about it in the town.
Right.
Because his family was getting some guff.
This is true. Yeah, you're right.
Before he ever like wrote down and recorded the incident.
So he has the first vision. At a certain point, he gets the plates, and then in getting the plates, there are a couple of things included. So the plates are like this, stack of gold plates, like a book, 3 rings in it. And it's like
maybe 4.
Maybe 4. I don't know.
Did they ever describe how many rings?
I'm gonna leave the church if it's 4 rings. And with it, what is in the box with him, Lyndon? What are the things in there?
There's the gold plates.
Okay.
The Urim and Thummim.
What's the Urim and Thummim?
Those are 2 white seer stones.
Are these clear stones?
I think they're just
white. Is
white.
this the idea? White? Because I thought that they were in
a breastplate.
A breastplate, what effectively becomes like glasses.
Yeah.
Like there's in a loop, like
you put them in a little frame.
Calls it like they're shaped as a bow, is what he described, and I always was confused at that until I saw like a picture, and it would be like a figure 8 or like an infinity sign, basically glasses. Mm-hmm. Put the stones in the glasses, which are attached to a breastplate. Is that correct?
There's a breastplate in there.
Somewhere in there. I believe the Sword of Laban was also, which is a character in the Book of Mormon, which the gold plates are a record of. And so that's everything in there. And the idea being that these plates are recorded from long ago. Ancient people, time of the Bible, had lived a history and recorded it on these plates in another language, and included these stones for the sole purpose of interpreting the language in which it was written.
Yes.
A smart thing, I think.
Because it would, Reformed Egyptian is what they called it.
Yes.
Some sort of mix of Hebrew and Egyptian, and it turned into its own thing.
A shortened version of like hieroglyphs or something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe it was like a mix. Like it had almost like Hebrew characters and hieroglyphs in there.
Yeah. So this is, I don't know about you, but to me, this makes a lot of sense. And that's why we've heard it this way.
Yeah.
Is that, you got an ancient language. You need to provide some way for whoever finds it to be able to translate it. Perfect sense. Logically. What's the thing you were saying earlier about like involuntarily just feeling like that's a good idea? Like
it's like if you hear the information, you're just gonna believe it.
And I do.
Yeah. You don't have to choose. It
Yeah.
just comes to you naturally, involuntarily.
And then the story goes that he, through some trial and tribulation, got the plates to his house, and then he translated it by the gift and power of God, which was through the Urim and Thummim, these rocks, the stones, and the glasses, and he translated it.
Well, then that's debatable.
And now,
Because I'm not sure he used those at all for the translation.
well, that's this. Did you not? Is that not sort of what we're told, though? Is what we're.
Well,
this is where.
Well, and it's interesting because every picture you see is just Joseph Smith sitting down by candlelight, cracking open the book,
Yeah.
following along with his finger.
Yes.
Which my understanding is how it was done at the very end, but certainly not in the beginning. One picture shows like that he put like the curtain up in between him and his scribe,
Yeah.
so they couldn't see what was going on. But my first indication of the truth is when I was in like 9th grade, and like people are like, "We just saw South Park,"
South Park.
and they said Joseph Smith translated your Book of Mormon in a funny little hat. And I was like, "Come on, guys, how ridiculous is that? You honestly don't believe that, do you?" Like, I'm a member of the church. Let me tell you,
Yeah, that's not the truth.
that's not how it happened.
Yeah, trust me.
Except, besides the little song and dance, not historically accurate.
Yeah.
You know, Matt Parker, Trey Stone.
Yeah.
Matt Stone, Trey Parker.
Interchangeable.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's quite accurate. That's pretty much how it went.
The stove, though, I think they used a black stovepipe hat.
Yeah.
The historians say it was white.
Really?
I think, yeah, that's what I saw.
That's a new fact. I did not know that
It
one.
was a white hat.
Fact check that.
Is it? But yeah, so it's like the Book of Mormon would be on the table, and then he'd have his seer stone, not the Urim and Thummim
Yes.
from that came with the plates, but his own personal seer stone.
So now.
Drop it in the hat, stick his face in because it had to be dark so he could see.
Uh-huh.
And did the angel Moroni instruct him to do this? I don't think so.
Hard to say.
Is it something he'd been doing for years prior? Yes.
This is where I get a little rocky, and this is where the floor kind of got the rug pulled out from under me on this one. I didn't realize, and I guess for years, you know, Urim and Thummim, seer stones had all been thrown around, and I had always just sort of assumed that it happened the way that, like, you see the picture, good enough for me, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
That is not how it happened. So now we got to go back in time. So ultimately, so you you alluded to it or basically explained it. The way, couple of key factors here of the actual translation process of the Book of Mormon. Often, if not always, we'd have to double check this. Often, if not always, the plates themselves were wrapped up in a cloth.
Mm-hmm.
He was not looking at the plates when he translated. They were wrapped up in a cloth, either off to the side. Often they were in a different room under the bed, I'm told, or I read is where sort of a location for them are. And then he would be, like you said, with a seer stone, which is a little rock basically, and he'd put it in a top hat.
Stovepipe hat.
A stovepipe hat. Is that a different?
Basically the same.
This is we're being accurate here. Okay. Stovepipe hat. Puts his face in, and is it right that he sees the words light up, sort of a thing, like it's an iPhone? And
yeah, like he needed the darkness to see the light, the words kind of appear on the stone or in the hat. I don't know.
Yeah. Then he would dictate them, and then his scribe, of which he had several, would write it down.
Yeah.
And then the sentence, once he got it correct, the sentence would disappear, and then another sentence would appear, and then he would read that, and that's how it would go for 500 pages of plus 116 of the Book of Mormon. So, I think, if I'm correct, he used the actual Urim and Thummim for the first 116 pages, which were lost.
Yeah.
After someone wanted to look at them, and he lent them to this other person, and then he lost it, and then he had to kind of start from scratch.
Sounds like a true fact to me.
And then from then on, what he used as his seer, as the translator, interpreter, was his own personal seer stone,
Yeah.
not the Urim and Thummim, which came with the plates.
Yeah.
Does any of this sound fishy to you? You're all good with it, though. You said.
Well, if you like, there's a history where like people are just the Urim and Thummim.
Yeah.
Seer stones have a long history in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's a well established practice that seers would use stones to receive revelation.
Yeah.
Hence why Moroni, very pragmatic, packed some seer stones with the plates. He's like, you're probably going to need these.
Yeah.
But it just so happens Joseph Smith was well prepared.
Yeah.
He already had his own.
He had his own.
He found it in a well.
He found it in a well, and this is maybe the single most disturbing fact about church history. To me, personally...
It could be very faith-affirming alternatively.
To someone else, maybe it could be. For me, disturbing. Or at least when I first heard it, it was disturbing. I guess I'm just used to it now, which, again, lends to the fact, just tell us this in the beginning, and I think I'd be fine. But, yeah, he's digging a well years before, helping someone dig a well. A guy finds a rock, not Joseph Smith, another guy who's helping them. He finds the rock, picks it up. He's like, man, look at this cool rock.
A very cool rock.
And it is a cool rock. It's well established. It's like a chocolate color. It's
like the
swirls.
shape and size of an egg.
Yeah.
With brown and white marbling in it.
Yeah, very cool. And then Joseph Smith, I think, he's like, hey, can I see that? And he's like, okay. And then he's like, yeah, I'm just going to keep this. And then I think there was some issue about him keeping it, or like, hey, that's mine. I want that back. That I would have to get into again. But
either way, I'd say Joseph Smith deserved it.
now he's got a seer stone, so-called. Okay, this is where I'm like nervous to continue, even just because now we get into the context of the money digging and the scrying, which is, I think, it's like using the rock to find hidden treasure.
Yeah,
which is something
treasure hunting.
Treasure hunting. The idea being that you can see in the ground where the treasure is with this rock.
It would be revealed to you.
It would be revealed.
Revelation.
Yeah, and
people were very much about it at that time.
Yeah, they were really into it. It was a thing. You mentioned water divining.
Yeah.
A similar process of like trying to find underground wells, water wells, and where they would dig and make a well, and sometimes that worked, I guess you said.
Joseph Smith, Sr. and Jr.,
Yeah.
they became well established for their ability to identify water wells.
Right.
So
maybe they
it was
could.
their little side hustle.
Yeah. Making it their main hustle.
Yeah. And then one little enterprising person wanted them to use their seer stone to find an alleged gold or silver vein that was in the area.
Okay.
Because it's like, well, if they can find water wells,
Yeah.
they can find some gold or silver.
I think they had been doing this already too. Like, this isn't like a one-time thing. It's like they've had several ventures into this money digging, treasure hunting business, and
they had a reputation for being good at it.
I don't know if they ever found any treasure though.
I'm just saying they had a reputation.
Here's another thing that is sort of, I think, is important in the context of it. When they got to a location where they claimed a treasure was, they had to perform like folk magic, as you know, and again, put yourself back in that time period. Very normal thing, folk magic.
Mm-hmm.
I think a more cynical word to use would be occult magic.
Don't say that.
Let's not use that word though. It's just like magic, like Harry Potter.
Folksy style magic.
Folksy, harmless magic. And so, you'd have to sort of draw a circle around it, do a little, say a few words, a spell, you might say, and an incantation, perhaps, an ordinance, even
A ritual.
And then that would sort of protect the area because there was always, gosh, it gets crazy. There's like guardian angels that protect the treasure or something, and so you need its permission, or you need to like get rid of the guardian angel to get the treasure. And if you do it wrong, then so they do the digging and they can't find the treasure. The claim is, oh, the treasure was moved by the guardian angel.
I'm following.
Okay. So this is all true, by the way. This is all true.
Yeah.
And it's upsetting, isn't it? Is this upsetting to you at all? This is why I hesitate to even get into this
I
stuff.
suppose it could be upsetting to many people. Not me.
Not you.
You know, like we're just like weird.
It's weird.
Weird magic stuff, and I'm like, people do weird stuff today.
It's true.
You know, it's like folk magic.
Not Mormons.
Folk magic was big back then.
Yeah.
Well, you know, crystals and multi-level marketing are really big today.
Yeah.
Are they evil? I don't know.
Maybe.
Doubtful. So it was like a silly,
yeah.
and I know like people back then, they called it the Second Awakening. You know, they were really inching up towards the Restoration because people were like becoming disillusioned with traditional organized religion.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought this kind of folk magic-y thing and like seer stones, you know, it was all like, this is getting us closer to the ancient church.
Yeah.
Is what people in that time and area thought.
Yeah.
So in their mind, they're just like, yeah, this is the right and godly thing to do.
And really, I guess what you would call the miracles of Jesus and all of the previous prophets would be magical or like, again, metaphysical or miraculous, you know. So from their perspective, I could see it. So maybe let's like finish off the story. He gets this, he's got the rock. There's, you know, he's kind of a failed treasure digger.
Couldn't find it.
Really no, and I think he's brought up on some charge. There's some affidavit signed somewhere where they try to charge Joseph Smith
Being a disorderly person.
right, which is basically that he was conducting himself dishonestly when he claimed he could help them find money or whatever. Dropped, right?
Never convicted.
Acquitted, never
acquitted.
convicted, whatever. It was dropped. He at a certain
So
point.
we can confidently say false accusation.
False accusation, guys.
The courts have never got it wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Just ask OJ. So that's all. And at a certain point, he's sort of done with the money digging game.
Yeah.
And I think around, now this is something I don't know is which sort of the time frame of when he's doing the money digging versus when he's getting into the plates and the translation stuff.
I'm going to go ahead and speculate that one of the reasons he couldn't get started with translating the Book of Mormon
It's because he's still doing
is
the.
because he's messing around with folk magic.
Yeah,
Lord can't have him messing around with folk magic and trying to translate the Book of Mormon.
yeah.
He's got some growing up to do.
So this is.
It's like he can't be at home playing Fortnite all day.
No, he's got to grow the F up.
That was the 19th century Fortnite.
Money digging.
Money digging.
Even his dad was into it. Okay, so I guess like for me, I had an issue with the fact that the Book of Mormon was translated via this random rock the guy found in a well.
Why would you call it random?
Because it's random.
How random is it that Joseph Smith, prophet of the Restoration, comes upon it? You might say completely coincidental,
I don't know.
foreordained.
I mean, my
You
question.
could go either way.
My question is, was the rock doing anything at all? I don't know.
Evidently, yes.
Evidently, yes. The explanations later on, because I believe it's around Brigham Young, as quick as Brigham Young, or even as quick as Joseph Smith himself, he stopped using
Right. So
seer stones.
So the historians say like he didn't use the seer stone for any of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Right.
And I think Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, one of them. One of them was like, "Hey man, like you're not using the seer stone anymore. We're all like, our faith is really rooted in this seer stone.
We need those stones,
and
bro.
You're not really using it anymore. We're a little worried." And he's like, "Oh, actually, I've just become accustomed to the spirit of prophecy and revelation that I don't need it anymore."
Yeah.
And that was a really hard pill for the Latter-day Saints to swallow.
A seer stone-sized pill for them to swallow.
Yeah, they're like, "Wait, so now you're saying you can do it without a seer stone?"
Yeah.
And then there was like people got excommunicated. There's like an 11-year-old boy in his family. He had a seer stone and he started receiving revelation. And they excommunicated him and ground up his stone to dust.
Oh, wow. Wowzer.
So then it's like they take a hard, 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey guys, we actually don't need seer stones anymore." And people are like, "How is that possible? Because seer stones are everything."
They're our testimony.
Right? And then like even Brigham Young is still kind of like, he's like, "Hey, we don't really use seer stones anymore, but we still like them."
Yeah.
And he said things like, "Everyone in the world has a seer stone designated for them."
Yeah.
And he's like, "We still like hold on to them." And they did.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Joseph Smith had like 5 of them. Blah, 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 blah." And he's like, "And we love them, but we don't need them."
Were they ever real? Did it ever work? Was it sort of just a way? Here's the most, for me, the most optimistic way to look at this. Mm-hmm. Seer stones were never a thing. It was maybe a tool or something akin in our day, maybe like we really love our iPhones, or we love, we have any number of things that we're attached to that have really no spiritual significance, but we seem to like them, and it works for us to, or I really like, movies, just something that really doesn't matter, but maybe it helps me to get to a place spiritually where I am able to receive revelation in the actual way that it happens, however that may be. Do you think that's like a fair reading of seer stones?
Yeah, I think that's kind of always been, it's like they're real in the sense that Joseph Smith thought he needed it.
Yeah.
And then he realized, I don't need it.
Yeah.
So it's like a spiritual crutch.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to discredit it, because then you got to discredit all the people in the Old Testament. But I don't mind doing that.
Yeah, screw them.
Old Testament, Old Schmestament.
Small schmest.
So
yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, because that's really.
So it's like, did he absolutely need him? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Until he didn't need him.
Yeah.
Because it's like, he needed to believe.
He needed to believe.
What's like the movie reference where it's like, oh yeah, MJ's secret stuff?
Yeah, and
or like the Looney Tunes.
The Toon Squad.
Yeah.
The Looney Tunes. Or Space Jam.
The ability was in them the whole time.
Yeah.
That was just ordinary tap water.
Yeah.
And they just used it so that they could believe in themselves.
This is like
Space Jam, a type and shadow of the Restoration. So it's just a rock. You could do a mineral composition analysis of it.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, it's a cool looking rock.
Just a rock, though. Or is it?
Or hold on.
Or it opens the gates of heaven and he could speak. God could speak through it. I don't know. I'm not sure. Probably the former, where it's just a rock and a training wheel of sorts to get him to a spiritual place he needs to be. I don't know. That's my most optimistic way of looking at it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Is that how we should end each of these particular kinds of episodes? Is just like, here's the most optimistic rationalization for this troubling church history artifact thing.
Well, and then you take that, the optimistic route, and then you also take
the most cynical?
By the fruits ye shall know them.
Okay.
What is the fruit of this seer stone?
Yeah.
It's the GB, the God-blessed Book of Mormon.
That's right, and an entire church that really flowed out of it, and what a good, mostly on the whole good organization it is today, helping lots of people
Yep.
find meaning in their lives.
The foundation, what did Jeffrey R. Holland in his dramatic speech? You got to crawl over, under, or around the Book of Mormon.
But you can't ignore it.
That's right.
Listen, there's things to be said about the Book of Mormon as well. We'll say it in another episode, though.
Literal translation.
We'll get to it.
Spiritual fan fiction.
My hope is not to ruin faith, but my hope is to inform people.
We already laid the foundation where it's like, take the information,
Yeah.
choose to believe.
And do your own research. We're idiots, of course. We don't know what we're talking about.
Also doctrinal doctors.
But we're also doctrinal doctors.
And spiritual surgeons.
Spiritual surgeons, and believe everything we say.
Because then the other thing is I think about is the famous theory of my ward mission leader when he was talking about the salamander letters. Mm-hmm. He's like, just separating the goats from the sheep, the wheat from the tares.
Right.
He's like, people that want it out, they use it as an excuse to leave, and good riddance.
Yeah.
And I was like, I always repeat that story. I never take a stance on it.
They didn't take the pragmatism route, huh?
Yeah, where they're just like, oh, perfect. It's like, now here's our chance to leave the church. And then it turns out to be like a hoax, and they're just like, well,
shoot. Yeah. Guess I'm already out.
Yeah. So, I think the 15, their stance is of the voluntary doxastic whatever, doxastic voluntarism. Mm-hmm. And so they want to get the information out.
Yeah.
And everyone...
And we're helping.
Yeah. And you take it in, and then you choose to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, a lot of... Here's what people often say when they hear these kinds of claims. They'll say, what is your source? Where'd you hear this from? Like, basically questioning if this actually is real or not. By all means, look it up. It is real as far as the historical records are concerned. Journals, diaries.
Email us with your concerns. We'll get our experts on it to bring you a citation. Citations.
Or read the gigantic book called Rough Stone Rolling. 1/3 of it is what's it called? Citations, notes into sources, for primary sources, etc. It's about Joseph Smith, his life.
And of course, any history of Joseph Smith is a history of the church.
True. So that's our, if this is troubling, that's okay. Hopefully we've maybe contextualized it in a way that is helpful. And again, we can begin.
Well, like I said, don't worry. I already told you, shout out to Luke Matthews. I hope he listens to the podcast. Taught a lesson about the Seer Stones and Institute.
Yep.
He had a whole course dedicated to these essays the church put out.
Mm-hmm.
So he could guide these poor people's hands through the process.
Yeah.
And just like one stout member of my ward heard all these facts for the first time and was like, what? Oh my gosh, this is real? Yeah. And he's like, yes, absolutely. And then he stared off into space for 10 seconds, just cognitive dissonance brewing away. And then the spirit came and cleared those clouds.
Yeah.
And they're like, how do you feel now? And he's like, great.
It's all true.
Exactly.
Here's my other thing though. If you're still confused, that's okay too. But I don't know. It's however you feel, it's okay. I don't know. I just wish I had something like this maybe. I had some good friends and everything help me in this when I was first learning, but also there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to calm me down. So.
Did I help you, Troy?
I don't remember. I don't
think I did.
No. You gave me a kind of a Nietzschean answer, which I don't know how helpful that was.
Probably not very.
Yeah. Anyway, let us know what you think. Rate, review, subscribe, or something. I don't know.
Hit the like button on Facebook.
Hit the like button.
I get notifications every week that someone liked the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
huh?
And I'm like, this is wild. And I love it.
Yeah.
Every week, more people are like liking it.
People still listen, even with our weeks-long, months-long interim periods. So if you enjoy this, keep listening and share it with your friends. And give us your feedback. Was this a good episode? Do you want to hear more of this, or has it gone too far? Do we just need to go back to the light, silly stuff? Talk about water balloons again.
The goofs and the gaffs.
The goofs and gaffs, and we can go back to that. Maybe every other episode we'll do a goofy story one. I don't know. We'll see. Lyndon, I don't know. What else? Anything else we need to cover?
You know, look up bloodstones. You'll love that too. Look up Brigham Young. He said something about everything.
Yes, he did.
Here's a story. Well, my concluding thought will be a story. It was, I was at the Cardston bookstore looking at used books because I was like, I need to read a nice gospel theology book. Looking at the used section.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like McConkey's like condensed version of the Journal of Discourse. Volume 2. It was a big, thick book.
Yeah.
They didn't even have volume 1 there.
Too big.
And I was like, what would happen to my mind if I were to read the Journal of Discourses? Just like the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah.
But and then I was like, I don't want to do this anyway. McConkey probably puts his bias all over it. The son of Bruce R. I forget his name. The son of Bruce R. McConkey, I think, did the condensed Journal of Discourses.
Tusar McConkey.
No.
No.
I think his name was like Joseph Fielding McConkey or something.
Oh, of course. Brigham Young McConkey. Yeah, of course.
But, who knows what'll happen to your mind when you take in all sorts of information like this.
Yep.
It'll probably get stronger.
Yes. Or it'll crack.
But all I say, keep reading, keep learning, study it for yourself. Always remember,
yes,
life's a mission.
Amen.